I never imagined that the quiet, orderly life I had built over the years would unravel into a nightmare of greed, betrayal, and murder. Growing up in a family that appeared picture perfect, I assumed that beneath the smiles at family dinners and holiday gatherings, everyone was content. My parents worked hard to give us a comfortable life, and although there was rivalry among the siblings, it was the kind of harmless competition one might expect. That was until the day I discovered a secret that would change everything. It began on an ordinary autumn afternoon. I was sorting through a stack of old documents in our family study, a room I rarely entered since it was filled with relics of our past. Yellowed photographs, letters, and important papers that my father had insisted on keeping safe. I had always been curious about our family history, but I never expected to find anything that would shake me to my core. In a leather-bound folder labeled Private, Do Not Distribute, I found a series of documents that seemed out of place. The top document was a draft of our father's will. I remember my father discussing the importance of updating his will every few years, but I assumed the details were handled by his lawyer and kept hidden from the rest of us. The draft, however, was filled with startling revisions that would favor one person above all the others. According to the document, nearly the entire estate would pass to my older sister, Emily, leaving the rest of the siblings with mere scraps. At first, I thought it must be a mistake, a misprint perhaps, but as I flipped through the pages, I found annotations in my father's familiar handwriting. They were curt, decisive, and merciless. It was clear that he had decided, long before his death, that Emily was to inherit almost everything. I remember the moment vividly. I sat in the study with my heart pounding, my hands trembling as I read through every word. I recalled childhood memories of Emily as a golden child, charming, clever, and always favored by our parents. But I also remember the undercurrent of tension that ran through our interactions. Emily was always competitive, and her desire to be the center of attention sometimes bordered on ruthlessness. At the time, I had dismissed it as ambition, not realizing that ambition could twist into something far darker. Later that evening, unable to sleep and burdened by the weight of what I discovered, I called my brother Michael. Michael, the middle child and often the peacemaker of the family, had always been close to me. We arranged to meet at our favorite diner, a small, nondescript place that served as our refuge from the world. Over cups of strong coffee and lukewarm pie, I recounted what I had found, watching his face darken with each revelation. "You're saying that Dad cut all of us out in favor of Emily?" Michael asked in a hushed tone, his eyes searching mine for confirmation. I nodded slowly. "I can't believe it, but it's all here in black and white. The annotations, the changes, they all point to the same conclusion. Dad wanted everything to go to her." Michael leaned back in his chair, his expression a mix of disbelief and anger. "That doesn't make any sense. Dad was always fair. He might have had his reasons, but he would never do something like this without explanation." I frowned, feeling the first prickles of suspicion. But what if there's more to it? What if Emily had something to do with it? I mean, she always had a way of getting what she wanted. I remember how she manipulated Mom into believing her ideas were for everyone's benefit. Michael's eyes narrowed. "You're saying Emily engineered this? That she might have coerced Dad into changing his will?" I hesitated before answering. "I don't know for sure, but it's the only explanation that makes sense. Emily has always been ambitious, and now that the money is involved, I can't help but wonder if she's willing to do whatever it takes." We sat in silence for what felt like hours, the clatter of dishes and the low hum of conversation around us fading into the background. I realized that what I had stumbled upon was not just a family squabble over money. It was a spark of something much more sinister. That night, I returned home with a mind in turmoil. The documents weighed on me like a curse, and I felt an overwhelming need to confront Emily. I remember pacing the floors of our old house, the very walls seeming to whisper secrets of betrayal and deceit. I had to know if what I feared was true, and if so, what my sister was capable of doing. The following morning, I resolved to act. I drove to Emily's apartment, a modern, upscale place that reflected her status as a favored child. I rang the doorbell with a mix of determination and dread. When she opened the door, her perfectly composed face quickly betrayed a flicker of surprise before she regained her composure. "Hey, She greeted me, her tone light but cautious. What brings you here? I didn't waste a moment. We need to talk, Emily. It's about Dad's will. Her smile faltered for a split second, replaced by an inscrutable expression. What about it? I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. I found some documents, drafts, and notes that suggest you've been planning to get the entire inheritance. I know that Dad's will was changed, and I have reason to believe you had something to do with it. For a long moment, Emily said nothing. The silence between us grew heavy with unspoken accusations. Finally, she spoke in a measured tone. You really believe that I would stoop so low? That I would manipulate Dad into doing something so drastic? I met her gaze steadily. I have no proof yet, but the evidence is there, and I'm not the only one who's noticed. Michael is worried, too. We always thought that Dad would have split things evenly among us. Emily sighed and moved to the window, looking out at the bustling street below. Sometimes, things are not as simple as they appear. Dad had his reasons you may not understand. My pulse raced. Then help me understand. Tell me what happened. She turned slowly, her eyes cold. You want the truth? Fine. The truth is that I was always going to be the one to inherit everything. I worked hard to secure my place in this family, and I was willing to do what needed to be done to ensure that Dad's final wishes were carried out. Her words hit me like a punch in the gut. Are you saying you coerced him? That you manipulated him? Emily's voice dropped to a whisper, yet every word was laced with conviction. I did what was necessary. I made him see that the only way to secure our future was to leave everything to me. I tried to protect the family legacy, even if it meant sacrificing the trust of those who stood in my way. I staggered back, feeling as if the floor had shifted beneath me. You sacrificed us? You sacrificed your own siblings for money. Her eyes hardened. This is not about money. It's about survival. Our family is falling apart, and if I don't take charge, everything will be lost. You think I wanted this? You think I enjoyed it? No, but I had no choice. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all I could manage was a trembling silence. In that moment, I realized that the sister I thought I knew was not the person I had grown up with. Behind the mask of charm and perfection lay a cold, calculating heart willing to do anything for power, and that power was now tied up in our father's fortune. Emily took a step toward me, her voice low and dangerous. You have a choice, brother. You can either be part of this new order or get in my way. I swallowed hard, anger and hurt mingling in my chest. You are not my enemy, Emily. I loved you. I believed in you. But this is murder. You are willing to kill anyone who stands between you and what you think is rightfully yours. Her lips curled into a bitter smile. Murder? You misunderstand me. It's not murder if you do it for the family. It's cleansing. It's about eliminating the obstacles. And you, dear brother, are one of those obstacles. I stepped back, my mind reeling. The woman I had once admired had become something unrecognizable, a predator with a heart as black as night. Then I have no choice but to stop you, I whispered. For a moment, Emily's eyes widened with shock, and then she laughed, a sound devoid of humor. You think you can stop me? I have spent years preparing for this. Every move I made, every lie I told, has brought me to this point, and if you get in my way, you will be the first to fall. I left her apartment that day with a heavy heart and a newfound determination. I knew that stopping her would not be easy. I also knew that I could no longer trust anyone in the family. The battle for our father's legacy had turned deadly, and I was now caught in the crossfire. I spent the next few days combing through every scrap of evidence I could find. Old family photos, letters, even conversations I had overheard at gatherings. I reached out to Michael, who was as distraught as I was, and together we began piecing together the puzzle. What had once seemed like sibling rivalry over an inheritance was now morphing into a sinister plot that threatened not just our financial future, but our very lives. Michael confided in me that he had heard whispers from our cousins about Emily's behavior in recent years. There were rumors of heated arguments, unexplained disappearances, and even talk of foul play. The more I learned, The more I realized that Emily had been orchestrating events behind the scenes, manipulating everyone to ensure that she would emerge as the sole beneficiary of our father's wealth. I decided to dig deeper, even if it meant confronting painful memories and risking further family division. I revisited our childhood home, searching through the attic and basement for any clues that might reveal the extent of Emily's machinations. I found old diaries and letters written by our father, hinting at a growing sense of disappointment with how the family was evolving. In one particularly damning letter, he mentioned that he had begun to question whether he had made the right choice in favoring one child over the others. The letter was never sent, and I suspected that Emily had intercepted it long ago. As I pieced together the evidence, a dreadful pattern emerged. Emily had systematically isolated each of us siblings, turning us against one another. She had sown seeds of distrust, whispered lies, and manipulated our emotions so skillfully that by the time we realized something was amiss, it was too late. The inheritance was not just a matter of money. It was a power struggle, a battle for control of the family name, and Emily was prepared to eliminate anyone who dared oppose her. That night, I sat alone in my room, staring at the documents spread out before me. Every word, every signature, felt like a betrayal. Tears streamed down my face as I grappled with the fact that the sister I once adored was capable of such treachery. I vowed then and there that I would do everything in my power to expose the truth, even if it meant risking my own life. I knew that I could not allow Emily to succeed in her dark, twisted plan. The stakes had never been higher. What began as a bitter family dispute had escalated into a deadly game of chess, and I was determined not to be the pawn that she sacrificed to win the ultimate prize, the entirety of our father's fortune. I spent the following days reaching out to trusted relatives, trying to gauge if others had noticed the unsettling changes in Emily. Many were too frightened or too manipulated to speak openly. It seemed that Emily's influence ran deep, leaving few who dared to question her actions. I realized that I was increasingly isolated, forced to rely on my own instincts and the sporadic support of Michael. One evening, as I was returning from a long, fruitless meeting with one of our cousins, I felt a chill run down my spine. I had the distinct sensation that someone was following me. Glancing over my shoulder, I caught a fleeting glimpse of a dark figure disappearing into the night. My heart raced as I quickened my pace, feeling that the stakes of this dangerous family feud were about to become even more personal. I knew then that Emily was not only willing to manipulate our father's will and pit us against each other, she was prepared to go further, to eliminate anyone who posed a threat to her ambition. And if she was capable of such ruthlessness, then I had to be even more vigilant. The path ahead was fraught with danger, and every step I took could be my last. I returned to my apartment, locking the door behind me, and sat down at my desk. I began to write everything down. The details of Emily's plan, the clues I had uncovered, and conversations that hinted at her involvement in disturbing family events. This diary became my lifeline, a record of the unfolding drama that I could later use as evidence if I ever had to confront her or expose the truth to the rest of the family. As I penned my thoughts, I could hear the distant sound of a car engine idling outside. I froze, listening intently. Was that just my imagination, or was someone really out there waiting for an opportunity to strike? I couldn't tell, but the feeling of dread was overwhelming. I resolved that I would not be a victim. I would fight back, no matter the cost. Little did I know, the battle had only just begun, and the true extent of Emily's sinister plot was yet to be revealed. I barely slept that night. Every shadow in my apartment felt like a threat. Every creak of the floorboards a warning. Emily had always been cunning, but now I was certain she was watching me. I kept replaying our conversation in my mind, her cold, calculated words, the way she had dismissed my concerns as if I were nothing more than an inconvenience. I knew then that I couldn't take her threats lightly. The next morning, Michael called me before I had even finished my first cup of coffee. His voice was tense, urgent. Someone broke into my house last night. I sat up straight, my pulse spiking. What? Are you okay? I'm fine, but they trashed my office. It was like they were looking for something. Nothing valuable was taken, just papers, files. A chill ran through me. Michael, this is Emily written all over it. He sighed, and I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. I know. I don't have proof, but it makes too much sense. I think she knows we're digging. That was the moment I realized we had crossed a line. This wasn't just about the will anymore. It wasn't about money. This was a game of control, and Emily was willing to play dirty. I had to act fast. I spent the next few days meticulously combing through everything I could find on Emily, her finances, her past relationships, even old childhood stories that might explain her growing obsession with power. I had always known she was ambitious, but what I uncovered painted a much darker picture. In college, she had a reputation for manipulating professors to get ahead. Rumors of blackmail and bribery surrounded her, though nothing was ever proven. After graduating, she cut ties with most of her old friends. The ones who did remain in contact all had the same thing to say. Emily always gets what she wants, no matter the cost. Over the past 5 years, she had funneled money into offshore accounts, hidden transactions, quiet financial moves that suggested she was preparing for something big. But the most shocking revelation came when I looked deeper into our parents' past. I found medical records that showed our father had been under extreme stress in the months leading up to his passing. His health had declined rapidly, with no clear explanation. There were mentions of unexplained episodes, blackouts, dizziness, sudden confusion. The doctors had no conclusive diagnosis, but the pattern was disturbing. Then, buried deep in our father's old belongings, I found a letter. It was dated 3 weeks before his death, addressed to his lawyer, but never sent. It read, "I need to make adjustments to my will. I have concerns about one of my children's intentions, but I need more time to confirm. Please delay the finalization until we can speak." My stomach turned. He had been on the verge of changing the will, potentially reversing the unfair inheritance split when he died. Had Emily known? Had she done something to make sure he never got that chance? I didn't want to believe my own sister was capable of something so sinister, but the more I uncovered, the harder it was to ignore the evidence. I needed answers. That night, I drove to Emily's apartment again, unannounced. I had no plan, just burning questions and a gut feeling that things were spiraling out of control. She opened the door, dressed immaculately as always, her expression unreadable. "Back so soon?" I pushed past her into the apartment. "Cut the act, Emily. I know about Dad's letter. I know he was going to change the will." For a brief second, something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe even fear. But then it was gone. She sighed, closing the door behind her. "You always were too smart for your own good." My chest tightened. "So it's true? You knew." She walked to the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine. "What does it matter now? He's gone. The will is final." I clenched my fists. "Did you have something to do with his death?" Emily let out a low chuckle, swirling the wine in her glass. "You sound ridiculous. What exactly are you accusing me of? Don't play dumb. You did something to him. The blackouts, the confusion. What did you do, Emily?" She took a slow sip of her wine, then set the glass down. "You're paranoid." I stepped closer. "And Michael? His house was broken into. That wasn't a coincidence." Emily's eyes narrowed. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Liar." The room fell into heavy silence. Then, in the calmest, most chilling voice I had ever heard from her, Emily said, "You should stop looking into this, brother. For your own good." My stomach dropped. That wasn't just a warning. It was a threat, and I had just put myself in the direct line of fire. I left Emily's apartment that night shaken, but more determined than ever. If she had gone this far, there was no telling what she would do next. I needed proof, solid, undeniable evidence that could expose whatever she had done. And I needed to get it before she found a way to silence me for good. I called Michael immediately. We agreed to meet at a small hotel room, somewhere private away from prying eyes. Over cups of bitter coffee and under the sterile glow of fluorescent lights, we spread out all the documents on the table. Michael's eyes grew wide as he saw the raw evidence. Emails from a lawyer mentioning hidden accounts, bank transfers that Emily had initiated shortly after Dad's death, and even a series of encrypted messages that he had managed to decode with the help of a tech-savvy friend. The messages revealed that Emily had been in contact with someone from a private security firm, a man who was willing to handle problems if any of us started asking too many questions. Every piece of evidence confirmed my worst suspicions. Emily wasn't simply fighting for the inheritance. She was eliminating anyone who could stand in her way. It wasn't just a power play over money. It was an all-out war against her own siblings. Michael's face hardened as he said, "We always suspected she was manipulative, but this is something else." I'm not the only one who felt pushed aside, but I never imagined she would go this far. I could feel the weight of the truth settle over me. I had written everything down in my diary, preserving every detail in black and white. I backed up the files on a secure drive and shared copies with Michael and a trusted family attorney I had known for years. I knew that if I could get hold of this evidence in a courtroom or even to the media, Emily's carefully constructed facade would crumble. That night, as I sat alone in my darkened apartment, the silence was shattered by a faint scratching at the window. I jumped, my heart hammering in my chest. I peered through the blinds and saw only darkness. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I double-checked the locks on the door and windows before returning to my desk. The security of my home had been compromised, and I knew that Emily's reach extended far beyond the family inheritance. Every time I thought I was one step ahead, her shadow loomed closer. In the following days, I became increasingly cautious. I changed all my passwords, had my apartment inspected, and even installed a small surveillance camera in the entryway. I began receiving anonymous messages on my phone, short, cryptic warnings telling me to stop digging or else. But I refused to back down. The more threats I received, the more determined I became to expose the full extent of Emily's treachery. Late one evening, Michael and I met again at a secluded diner on the outskirts of town. He slid an envelope across the table. "I managed to get this from Uncle Robert," he whispered. Inside were copies of documents that Uncle Robert had kept hidden in a safe deposit box. They detailed large sums of money that had been diverted into an account in Emily's name shortly after our father's passing. It also contained a series of letters between our father and a close confidant, expressing his deep regret over the changes Emily had imposed on his will. It was all damning. As I leafed through the pages, my hands trembled. I realized that our father, in his final days, had been trying to correct a wrong that was about to be committed. He had planned to amend his will, to leave a fair share to each of us, but something had prevented him from acting. Michael leaned in and said, "I'm convinced now. Emily has been orchestrating this entire power grab, and if we don't stop her, she'll eliminate anyone who stands in her way. I don't want any more of us to get hurt." I nodded in agreement. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was no longer a bystander. I had to make a choice: continue gathering evidence until it was irrefutable, or confront her head-on and risk everything. I decided that justice for our father and protection for our lives demanded that I bring her deeds to light. With the evidence in hand, I contacted our attorney, Mr. Thompson, a stern but fair man who had handled our family's legal affairs for years. I arranged a meeting in his office, where we reviewed the documents one by one. He confirmed that, legally, Emily's actions could be considered fraudulent and potentially criminal if they were linked to any tampering with our father's final wishes. "This is a disaster waiting to happen," he said gravely. "You have to be careful. Emily is dangerous, and she will not hesitate to silence anyone who tries to stop her." I left Mr. Thompson's office with a mix of relief and dread. At least I now had the legal backing to fight her. But I also knew that once I made my next move, there would be no turning back. I spent that night finalizing a plan. I would confront Emily one last time, armed with all the evidence, and demand that she come clean. If she refused, I would have no choice but to turn everything over to the authorities and let the full weight of the law fall on her. I knew the stakes were high. Our family's legacy and our lives depended on what happened next. In the weeks that followed, the truth was laid bare. The legal proceedings that ensued exposed the full extent of Emily's manipulations. Our father's final wishes were revisited in court, and it was decided that the inheritance would be distributed fairly among all siblings. Michael and I, though scarred by the betrayal, began to slowly rebuild our relationship, finding solace in the shared resolve to honor our father's memory in a way that upheld justice. Emily, meanwhile, faced the consequences of her actions. While she continued to claim that she had acted in the family's best interest, the damage was done. The legacy she had so desperately tried to seize was now a cautionary tale of greed and cruelty. I learned a painful lesson about the lengths some people would go for power, and about the cost of secrets and lies. Although our family would never be the same, I took comfort in knowing that truth had prevailed, even if it came at a high price. The wounds will heal with time, and I hope that someday we can all move forward. If not as a united family, then at least as individuals who have seen the worst of human nature and emerged wiser. I carry the scars as a reminder that sometimes the greatest strength lies in the courage to confront darkness, no matter how twisted it may be.